Okay, we're at the Tiger Club of Kansas City, March 26th. Next to the last meeting of the year, we're very honored to have with us from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, Dave Matter. Dave, thanks so much for coming.
My pleasure.
You're one of the favorites every year, and for good reason. I mean, you've got the most information and always on anything Mizzou. And I've said to you personally a few times, I don't know how you even sleep, because you're tweeting out when I first wake up and when I go to bed and every time in between.
Well, like 50% of it's true also. So I especially when I'm up here talking to some of these questions, I never know what to expect, but it's always my pleasure, and there's always something to talk about.
Let me ask you this. You spent a lot of time covering Mizzou. Before you joined the Post-Dispatch, you were with the Columbia Tribune, I believe. So in switching to a major metropolitan newspaper, but still staying in Columbia, has it made a difference in your coverage?
My coverage is a little different because I focus more on just football and men's basketball, and then pick up some of the other stuff during the year. Whereas at the Tribune, I was doing a little bit of everything, mainly football, but probably more of the non-revenue sports. So at least I have that in my background, and now can just kind of pick and choose when we decide to cover those things. But I really like doing both of the main sports. You're busier when they overlap, like they do this time of year a little bit when spring football is going on, and then certainly in the fall. But I like being busy, and it's been a blast.
And I would guess also now, since you're with the Post-Dispatch, you would point out when a player from Vianney or Chaminade, you'll get that local aspect.
You have to keep that in mind, which sometimes when you don't live in St. Louis, you kind of forget about that angle, because I still kind of consider myself a mid-Missourian, even though I grew up in St. Louis. I've been in Columbia for so long, so there's that angle too we always got to think about.
Tell us briefly your thoughts about the upcoming football season.
I like this team and the talent that Barry Odom's put together. Now there's this cloud sort of lingering over everything with the NCAA sanctions, but I think if you put that aside and just look at what they have on both sides of the ball and look at the schedule, there's no reason to think this team can't be better than it was last year. I think you lose, obviously, a great quarterback in Drew Lock. I think the pieces around Kelly Bryant and then his talent can lead this team to maybe win some more games even, because I think all the pieces are in place. Defensively, there are times where they can't be a lot worse than they were last year, although they made a lot of strides. And I think they'll continue to make strides on that side of the ball. So I think the pieces are right there to have a really good year. We just don't know what the finish line will look like, because we don't know if they'll be playing in a bowl or not.
And then this year's team will be the first one that is entirely made up of Barry's own recruits. And it appears that the team is more bought in than perhaps they were a couple of years ago. Do you see that as a factor?
I do. I just think that those transition years were a little tough, and I think any new coach, I think your sales pitch can be received a little bit better sometimes, because there's a renewed sense of energy. Well, let's not forget, this team won the East in Gary Pinkel's in his 13th and 14th year, so he was doing something right. But I do think just the staff that Barry has right now, and I think the leadership from what those guys learned watching the end of the Gary years and the guys that came from those eras, I think just a lot of good people are in place right now. So we'll see if that translates into wins.
Let's transition to men's basketball. And what do you see going forward next year and down the road in the men's basketball program?
Well, you got to win more games. There's no doubt about that. And I don't think anybody's just going to say, oh, you get a free pass because you have injuries. But when you look at how this team played, I think you can be excited, or at least be optimistic about the way that this group has bought into Conzo Martin. Definitely has a style about that he'd like to play. He just needs more talent. He needs more depth and needs more health for sure. So I like what he has coming back, but this league is really good, and we see that now with 4 teams in the Sweet 16. Teams that have been decent are making coaching changes to try to get better. So this is a very much a different kind of basketball league than it was when Missouri first got into the SEC.
One last area, and we talked during your program here about Jim Sturck and the program athletic department in general. Do you see strides made in stability within the department, and then perhaps also within the university as a whole?
I think it's getting there, and you're seeing that definitely in the university as a whole. It just takes a while for those people, chancellor, president, AD, to kind of get settled into their roles. And at the same time, they've had a lot of fires to put out. You had 2015 you had to get over with. Now they're facing some revenue and financial challenges of having to operate at a deficit. They've been challenged to find ways to sell more tickets and fill the arena and fill the football stadium. But I do think kind of rallying around the South End Zone project has been a real positive for them. I think you throw in these sanctions that they're having to deal with. I think it's gotten people on the same page for the first time in a long time. We're talking about all the leadership and really the fans too. So I think there's an opportunity there for this to turn out to be a positive. But you just have to have, again, it's like a football team. You got to have the right people in place, all on the same page.
Well, along those lines, it's no secret that the university and the athletic department have not been on the best of terms with the Missouri legislature in terms of funding. So is it possible that the Make It Right campaign has been a galvanizing force for bringing the legislature and the university and the athletic department a little closer together?
It can be. I think there's also a lot of political grandstanding out there with folks put out a tweet and think that means that they are on board with the university when, it'll come down to what they really do, not what they say. But I do think, again, this is an opportunity to gain some support where in the past maybe they haven't had that in Jeff City. So we'll see.
Dave, thank you so much. We always enjoy having you coming up to Kansas City. We hope you enjoy your stay up here. Next week will be the final meeting of this academic year. We'll have Frank Boal, formerly of Channel 41, and before that, Channel 4. So Frank, now retired, will be our guest for the final meeting of the year. You can always check us out on Facebook and on Twitter. And we hope to see you next week at the Tiger Club of Kansas City.